I feel like we haven't been online together in a long while since our symposium last year. So it's great to be here and wonderful to see all of you in the room talking about arts and inclusion today. I just want to give a shout out to Abby and her committee, the inclusion committee here at CSLP. We are largely run by volunteers, so we can't bring you programming like this without their help, and of course the help of our wonderful presenter Stephanie. And I know I'm going to hand it over to Abby to do an introduction for you, but I just wanted to let everyone know that we really appreciate our volunteers here, and we're hoping for some really great content and some good interaction. So Abby, take it away.
All right, there we go. Got my video up. So you know what I look like. I am the Inclusion Committee Chair. And so we plan this as well as some of the manual stuff, but I'll get into that here in a second. So here's a little bit of housekeeping. You will receive a copy of the PowerPoint after the webinar is over. It will also be on the CSLP webpage under the Inclusion Resources page. Closed captioning is available through Zoom should you wish to use it. It is located on the bottom bar near the Q&A button. So you can click on that if you need closed captions. And then a little bit about the Inclusion Committee. We support and encourage a broad definition of diversity and seek to provide programs and resources that enhance knowledge and encourage understanding of equity, diversity, and inclusion. The committee members review the CSLP programming manual, and we also plan a yearly Zoom about inclusion. And this year happens to be art, which we are very excited about. So I will introduce Stephanie to you guys. Stephanie will be answering questions at the end. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. I will be monitoring that as well as Dawn and Melissa. And we will get to as many questions as we can. If we don't get to all of them, Stephanie will send out a follow-up email to answer some of those questions. So without further ado, Stephanie Haines is the Arts Education and Accessibility Program Manager at the Indiana Arts Commission, or IAC. She oversees the IAC's Arts Education Research Project, Partnering Arts, Communities, and Education, also called PACE, as well as Poetry Out Loud, Indiana State Poet Laureate Program, and Creative Aging Programming statewide. Stephanie has served as chair of the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, also called NASAA, Arts Education Working Group, AEWG, from 2019 to 2020. She is also the agency's accessibility coordinator, handling all ADA compliant procedures and leading an accessibility in the Arts Advisory Committee. Stephanie earned a Master's of Arts degree in Arts Administration from Indiana University and a Bachelor of Science degree in Visual Art Education from the University of Indianapolis. She has more than 15 years of experience working with teaching artists and arts integration programming, with specialties in professional development and artist lesson planning. Stephanie is a visual artist primarily in the mediums of painting and drawing. So take it away, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Abby.
Yeah.
Thank you all for being here today. I'm really excited. I'm excited to hear about your theme. One of the ways I got connected with your group is that here in Indiana, I recently did a webinar for our state library system and talked about creative aging in libraries all over the state. And similarly, I can already tell from the chat that you folks are excited and adventurous, and you're ready to get going with this. So thank you all for being here. We're going to talk about inclusion as it relates to accessibility. My background is in arts education and accessibility. And today we will explore tools, techniques, and strategies to make arts experiences more inclusive for people with disabilities specifically. And together, I know that we can unlock the potential for everyone to participate in and enjoy the arts. There's quite a lot of us on the call, so I really am open to you all chiming in and doing questions, and I'll try to catch them when I can, but we'll definitely do a Q&A at the end, and I know they're gathering all the questions as we go today. So what I'm going to go over today in this webinar is a welcome. I'm going to go over the goals of the webinar in a future slide here. I'm going to do an accessibility refresher. I was told that maybe some of us aren't in depth on accessibility rules and guidelines and best practices. So I'm going to do a refresher at the top for those of you who that would be helpful for. And then I'll get into the more specific creative arts strategies that I recommend and ways to make adaptations for people with disabilities. We'll also talk about how you continue to grow. This is a program that has no right answer, no end, or no black and white checkbox. It's like, yep, I did it. I did accessibility. It's done. So we'll talk about how to continue growing, which I'm still continually growing. And then we'll talk especially about community partners. I really want you all to know that there's partners in the arts wherever you are in the country, and how to find them and how to work with them. So introduction, I'm Stephanie Haines. Abby read my bio, which is great, but I am an artist who specializes in teaching, education, and like I said, sometimes it's in libraries, sometimes it's in community centers, sometimes it's school. We do formal school standard-based arts integration programming that I oversee, but I work at the Indiana Arts Commission, which is a statewide entity serving everywhere that our Hoosier citizens are. So yeah, it's everywhere for everyone. And this is just, I just thought you all voluntarily signed up to listen to me speak for 45 minutes. So here's a really cute picture of my sister and I at Halloween dressed up. Talking about the Indiana Arts Commissions, this is just a quick snapshot. We have this dashboard on our website of who we serve, what we do, but I'm just going to highlight the fact that we give out in one fiscal year, last fiscal year, 645 grants. And so that's for either an arts organization or an arts project across the state. And so all 645 of these grantees have my phone number to call if they have an accessibility issue. And that's just to highlight if I've seen a lot. I can't say I've seen it all. You never know, but I know what the common threads are. I know what the common questions are. And we have actually a frequently asked questions page on our website on the Indiana Arts Commission website. But that's why I feel comfortable putting out some of the most common things that I've heard out in the field. And like I said, we never will know everything that has to do with accessibility, but I've seen a good amount. So today's goals, we're going to understand accessibility basics, learn practical strategies, and then talk about the importance of the working with and serving the disability community. 1 in 4 people, okay, 25% of people in the US have a disability, and that's just self-reported. That's people who describe themselves as having a disability. And a lot of us will acquire a disability as we get older. You know, my dad, 75, uses a walker. He may not self-identify as a person with a disability. This is a newly acquired thing for him. So 1 in 4 is probably a conservative estimate. So this is your community. This is who you hopefully are serving, and they're there, and we want to make sure we create an inclusive and welcoming environment for everyone. And so we know that inclusive arts programs are going to bring those folks in, help them feel welcome, and help you connect with new patrons. What I really want you to take away today, I hope, is understand that accessibility is always important for that impact statement I said before. Please know that you can do this. Sometimes, even for me, accessibility gets big. It feels like there's too much to do. I can't do an elevator by myself. I can't, you know, I don't have $100,000. I'm worried I'm going to get sued. You know, you got these big things that bubble up and you have fear. But just know you can do this. In this conversation today, I'm going to talk about little things you can do, and really the little things make a big difference. Yes, sometimes we do need an elevator, and it doesn't have to be done tomorrow. This can be a longer plan, but the little things you can do right now are very important for an individual person. And so know that there are a lot of right answers. I think I said earlier there's no right answers, but also there's infinite right answers is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of different ways you can approach different situations. And so hopefully you take away from this that, you don't have to be intimidated if you don't know something, you just find a solution, because there are many solutions. And for those of us who feel that uncomfortableness of like, I can't know this. This is something, oh, you don't know who's going to walk through your door. You don't know what to prepare for them. Every single person who might walk through your door, people have cross-sectional disabilities. People have more than one disability that overlay on top of each other. So just remember, we are large, we contain multitudes. It's going to be great. And that applies to all of us. So here we're going to get into the refresher for accessibility. The definition, a definition for accessibility, my definition for accessibility is accessibility in the arts means creating environments and experiences that allow everyone to participate fully in the experience, right? So taking down those barriers, removing barriers so that everyone can fully participate. The Americans with Disabilities Act, we're going to get into in just a minute, mandates equal access to public spaces and programs. And so there is programmatic accessibility and physical accessibility. Those are two components of examining accessibility, and that's also later in the slides. So let's talk about the ADA. The ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, historically came about in the 90s. Earlier in the 70s, the Rehabilitation Act started this work, but mostly applied just to government, and still applies to government-related activities. And excuse me, and then through some amazing activism from the disability community, finally, the Americans with Disability Act was passed, which gave a much broader which gave disability rights to the community at large, not just if you are a government entity, but any entity open to the public. We'll get into that too in a minute. A person with a disability is someone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, has a history or record of such impairment, or is perceived by others for having an impairment. And this list was taken from the ada.gov website. It's easy to find this information. Examples of disabilities, these are not exhaustive lists. There's other things that aren't on here, but some of them are here. They're pretty wide stretch, and they have actually in recent years been expanded to include more invisible illnesses. The Americans with Disability Act is split up into different sections that govern the rules around different types of entities that need to provide accessibility. There's an employment section, there's state and local government, which some of you it might apply to, applies to me, but it might apply to you or it might not. And then, Title III is the one we're going to talk about, because that is the one that covers everyone, all the restaurants, hotels, anyone who's open to the public in that way. So Title III are businesses open to the public. Libraries definitely fall in here. And so if you're a business open to the public, you are required under the ADA to provide accommodations, reasonable accommodations, to remove barriers to participation in a program or services. Oh, my slide's a little off center here. Well, I'll fix that before I send it out. But basically, there's a few key vocabulary terms to think of when it comes to accessibility. Readily achievable barrier removal. That's like a term in the legislation for ADA. That means easily accomplishable and not too expensive. So if you're like, oh, our building's not accessible, we have to build a new building, that would not be a reasonable, achievable accommodation to make. Now, whenever I have been to trainings, they have said that just saying something's expensive has not yet passed in a court of law, that it's not the size of the expense that's necessarily going to say that it's not readily achievable. So it's one of those gray areas, but readily achievable is that you move the tables and chairs over, you bought some special equipment to help someone grab a pencil, you can do all kinds of things to make your programs and services accessible. So you are removing barriers. Reasonable accommodations, like we said, there's a certain definition, and it just means things that a reasonable person would be able to do in their work to remove these barriers. And we want to make sure everyone has an equal opportunity to benefit, right? So that's one of the key phrases we think about with making accommodations. With the ADA, let me just say real quick that when you start talking about ADA and legal and court of law, when you start saying those things, it might be a little confusing or worrying. And so while it is your legal responsibility, period, there's nobody out there who's going to come to your library and say, I'm doing an audit for accessibility right now. Well, let me say this. Nobody at the federal government who, is in the Department of Justice, whose job is to be doing accessibility audits. It's the right thing to do. And the most important thing is that people in your community feel welcome, feel excited to be there, even if they are a person with a disability. And that's the right thing to do. I am not a technical expert on accessibility, just a little refresher about the ADA. And so if you have more questions about the ADA, I encourage you to talk to the regional ADA centers. And they have anonymous hotlines, they have webinars, they can come train staff, they have all kinds of things they can do if you have more interest in learning about accessibility. So now we're going to talk about, we know what accessibility is, we know what we need to do under the ADA is remove those barriers. We are going to talk about adaptations and the way we can do creative arts in our programs. When we're thinking about identifying what those barriers are, one of the things I like to recommend, and this is on a later slide, but make sure in your registration form, if you have something that has a registration form, you have a space for people to ask for accommodations. And we say something in our forms like, what accommodations can we provide to ensure you can participate fully? We don't have to get into, and you shouldn't get into asking someone what their disability is. Give me details. What do you have, quote unquote, diagnosis-like things. We're just going to ask them what we can do to help them fully participate. So know about the challenges, the common ones, and then there might be others people bring up. And then know about make accommodations, like I'm going to show you in a minute, brush handles for paintbrushes, all kinds of materials that are really cheap and easy can make adaptations for arts activities. And then continue to plan for this, grow in this way, and make sure you're thinking about it ongoing in all of your programs and facilities. So yeah, for the identifying barriers, make sure you have a place for people to request accommodations and make it publicly known on your website that we will provide accommodations with 2 weeks notice or whatever is appropriate for that situation on whatever type of event you're doing. Make sure they know that they can feel comfortable making a request to you about what they need to fully participate. The next thing is to make sure you talk to your participant if you can, if the accommodation request is very straightforward, then great, you've got that handled. But most of the time, there's a little bit of nuance involved. And so there is nothing wrong with reaching out to that person and saying, hey, I noticed you said that you would like a certain type of seating when you come to our event. These are the 2 chairs options we have. Would either of these work for you? And then if they say, no, that's not quite what I was thinking, I need more like this, and then you can move forward to either borrowing or finding or buying something that will meet their needs. Or they may say, oh yeah, that's the one I need with no arms on it. So having a conversation with the person to get to their specific needs and to get to a solution that's creative and meets everyone's needs and is simple, that's the best way to do it. Just ask folks. They know what they need best. And then always think about doing an assessment of your site. I do once a year in our agency. I have a checklist, a big self-assessment workbook that I do at the end of every year, and then I make a new plan in January. And we look at physical accessibility and programmatic accessibility, how people participate in our programs as well as enter a physical space. Think about doing that, getting into a regular schedule of doing that, and then you'll be a lot more comfortable if something comes up that you need to make an accommodation. You have a plan for it. Providing accommodations can be as simple as moving chairs or, making space a little bit bigger, or it could be hiring an interpreter if you need someone with American Sign Language wants to attend an event, and then purchasing equipment, big and small. There's a whole spectrum of different adaptive equipment that you can use. It's really exciting. And then create a flexible plan, because like I said, know that you don't know exactly what someone might ask for. You didn't know someone was gonna need a chair with no arms on it, but you know how to deal with that when it is asked for. I get this a lot when I talk to our arts organizations about accommodations. They're like, I got a ramp on my building. I'm good, right? We're accessible. People can get through the front door. So yes, that's great. Getting through the front door is very important. Parking is important. Having a large bathroom stall is important. Those are all important. And the ADA regional centers know all the details about those. And there's lots of checklists online about those. But the whole environment and how they, like I said, access the actual activity are all important parts of removing barriers. So that's why we talk about 2 different things, physical accessibility and programmatic accessibility. Physical accessibility, like I said, can be tables, chairs, ramps, bathrooms for wheelchair mobility device users. There's all different kinds of mobility devices now. And it can be programmatic adaptations, working with folks who are deaf, folks who have visual impairment or blindness, cognitive, other ways which you can make accommodations for their full participation. Okay, here's what I'm sure you guys really came for, the actual items. This is just a sampling. There are so many creative ways to approach something as simple as using a paintbrush with accessibility in mind. And you can do this for one person who needs an accommodation, or you can do this for everybody, because honestly, this slide with the things on the fingertips looks really fun. I want to do that. I think if you brought that just for one person, the other people would be jealous. So this is something you could do for everyone. And normally when you make accommodations, everyone in the group benefits. For example, you're providing captioning. I don't know if you've ever seen cart captioning in real time. Someone's sitting there typing on a keyboard, everything that's being said, and then it's put up on a screen. You could see that at a theater during a performance. There's like a screen underneath or by your seat, or you can see it at lots of different places, but captioning in real time, I love captioning. I wouldn't identify as a person with a disability, and I wouldn't request captioning when I register for an event. But if someone requested captioning and you provided that, I would be very happy. So when you make these accommodations and you remove barriers for people with disabilities, it benefits a lot of people beyond just that's one person. So we've got these really simple things that help with grips on paintbrushes, or it could be a drumstick, or it could be a lot of things that the grips can be adapted to. I think it's like $5 on Amazon. Like all of these are kind of just snapshots from Amazon, typing in um, accessible art supplies. And then there is the thing on the right is a painting for people with sensory issues. It's like a painting thing where you don't get messy from it. I thought that was kind of cool. I've also seen that done with a Ziploc bag where you put paint and stuff inside, and then on the outside of the Ziploc, they can manipulate it with their hand. These scrapers that can manipulate paint are just easier to grasp for someone without fine motor skills, so you can make different designs. I recently saw one where a person was wearing like a laser on their head, and then they could point the laser on the sheet of paper on the wall, and then someone would follow the laser with the paintbrush, and then they could hold up different color options, and then the laser would show them what they wanted to paint on the thing. Using the bingo daubers is so cool and fun for everyone. So that's like a super easy way to make adaptations, and it's really simple. Here's some non-visual arts ideas that I came up with if you're doing arts that are music, performing arts, dancing. You know, I really love this one. Recently, I found out about the bottom right are tap dancing mittens. And if you can't stand up and do tap dancing, you can sit in a chair and on a table and make the same noises with your tap dancing mittens. Up on the upper left is a writing implement that will help someone write. Want to put a plug in for technology, you know, there's text to translate things, or talk to text things that can help people in a writing course. Obviously GarageBand can be really fun and collaborative if you have a small group. These are instruments that you can put on a wrist or an ankle. So there's a lot of percussion instruments that can be adaptive, and these are specifically drumsticks that have a different type of grip for drumming. In Indiana, we have a program that I think might be national, where they have at Easter Seals, it's called the Endata program here in Indiana, but they have a library of equipment that you can take out on loan, and a lot of it looks like these, and you can take it out on loan and see how it works and try it out, or figure out how to do the Braille printer, and they'll help with technical support for that. So that's really helpful. So those are really simple Amazon-based, like $10 and under things. There's also bigger things you can do. You can go bigger. This ZA Art specializes in these adaptive art equipment. So this is one I've seen with one of our local arts organizations. It's a kind of a printmaking style where they put a humongous canvas on the ground, and then you can use the roller to attach it to a mobility device. It could be a walker or a wheelchair, or electric wheelchair, and then move it around the canvas and make lots of designs. And they have other variations on this as well. So you can do small, you can go big. It's really great. I think that one was like $300, I think. So not insanely expensive either. If you know about universal design for learning, that's a really great way to start planning at the beginning to be inclusive of people with disabilities. Start with that principle. I'm not going to go into it today, but very easy to explore online. Make sure you're getting feedback as you go. So after the program, if you have a survey, that would be a great place to understand if people felt that their needs were met, or if it was difficult to find out about the program or do the activities. One thing I think is often overlooked is the outreach and marketing. If you are excited, willing, able to provide accommodations, like, yes, of course, we will provide ASL. Yes, of course, we will make accommodations, but nobody knows about it, they're not going to be likely to even try to come to your program, right? They're not going to know this person in the back office of the library is excited to provide me accommodations. They're just going to kind of assume that as many of the places they go, it's kind of a bare minimum and they can maybe get in, but working with my advisory committee, working with a lot of people with disabilities, they need to know, they need you to tell them that you are willing to make this accommodations for them. Here's a few ideas too. And the next one on this is about inclusive language and clear signage. So let's talk about signage and marketing. There are universal symbols for accessibility. If you are willing to provide, or if you are providing ASL interpretation, you can just put that symbol on your website, on your registration, on your poster, and that's going to communicate that you're accessible and you're open and you're ready to work with someone on accommodations. Now you can put that on there and then also ask them to request accommodations in the registration form. So you know when they're coming, who it is. The ASL interpreter often will want to know who they're working with, or just a little bit about when it's happening and how long and all that stuff. So having that communication is still vital. When you put the ASL up, doesn't mean you have to have an ASL interpreter on site all day, every day. It can be just a contracted time, but this is going to help people start to notice, oh, this is a place where they're open to working with people with disabilities. There's large print, obviously, and all of these symbols are downloadable at the graphicsartistguild.org, and you can download the files to use in your marketing. Clear signage and marketing and outreach, just I can't say enough about that. Because then we get into this chicken and the eggs situation where it's like, well, no one that needs ASL comes, and people with ASL don't know you're willing to provide it, and so they don't come, but then they don't come, so you don't think anyone wants to come. And so the more you get out and be proactive about your connection and your willingness and your inclusiveness, the better. Here's some other common types of accommodations I'm going to go over. I've used a good amount of these. Of course, American Sign Language interpretation, audio description for people who are visually impaired, where someone, well, I've seen it in like a theater situation, but it can also be in any sort of meeting. Someone can sit at the back of the room, an interpreter can sit in the back of the room and speak what's happening on stage, and the person has a hearing device that's going to let them hear, oh, there's one person, they look like this, they're doing this now. So it's visually describing what's happening in a situation. Like I said, the cart is the captioning in real time. It's really nice. It's more accurate than the AI or, automatic captioning. So if you have a person who has a disability and requests cart, it's really important you do that with a real person. And there's best practices and protocol that cart captioner follows. That's much better for the person with a disability. Closed captioning means you can turn it on and off. Open captioning means it's there for everyone to see all the time. They can't turn it off. But closed captioning is like what we have today. If you are on Zoom and you want to turn on the captioning right now, you could do that. Think about communication. I'm sorry, I'm missing all the chats. There's a lot of good chat happening, but communicating what's going to happen during an event, or a storyboard for someone who needs help communicating, food and dietary restrictions, image captions, web accessibility. I can't get into all of these today, but accessible documents, accessible websites for screen readers, for people with visual impairment. awesome things to make note of and think about and dive deeper into. If you haven't before, you can do a test online. There's a website, you can go test your website and see what it sounds like on as a screen reader, if a screen reader were using it. Make sure this is more for performances, but if there's any flashing lights, you have a guest performer, make sure you let people know. One of the folks on my advisory committee does have epilepsy and really needs those warnings if there's any flashing lights. And so she always advocates for those. And there's more. So large print text, touch, tactile things. I know a lot of libraries have 3D printers now, and that's a really great resource we found in the art community for 2D art that you can't touch because it's precious artwork, making the 3D version. And I'm sure a lot of you already know about that. On our website, I have a list of things you can do to grow your accessibility at your site. You can train your staff and volunteers on disability etiquette and language. Like I said, it's one of my things. Advertise your willingness to make accommodations and connect with local disability advocacy groups and support groups. We have them in every community. I hope you all are already connected with them. One of them nationally is the ARC, who works with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They're fantastic. I work with them locally here too. And they have self-advocates, people with disabilities who can help consult on things. I always recommend compensating people if they consult with you. But that's a great way to get connected and learn more if you want to grow your accessibility at your site. Other types of associations like the Council for the Blind, the Council of the Blind, they have affiliates in 70 locations around, and the ARC has 600 locations or chapters or whatever. So you could type in the ARC and your city, or Council of the Blind and then your state. Specifically for arts, we also have specific local partners like the VSAs of the United States. And if you're not familiar with VSAs, I am excited to tell you there are tons of VSA affiliates all across the country that specialize in arts and disability and the intersection of that. They provide programming for people with disabilities in the arts. And the one that we have here in Indiana is called Art Mix. They do art for everyone, and they have tons of services for people with disabilities in an integrated setting, and they provide us tons of expertise and consulting. Other VSAs like VSA Massachusetts, which is now called Open Door Arts. The VSA network used to be more like VSA Indiana, VSA Massachusetts, and then in recent times, in the last maybe decade or so, they've all split off and they have different names now, but you can still search VSA and your state and probably find what you're looking for online. And Outreach is an organization specializing in consulting and work for people with disabilities in the arts, and that is based in Pennsylvania. So you have tons of partners, and that's just big national partners you can reach out to. I utilize those organizations myself when I'm looking for expertise, but also there's artists in my community who are artists with disabilities who I also talk to. And that's a great way to understand more about what's available in your community, what's missing from your community, how to find an audience that is new to you if you want to start doing outreach and bring more people with disabilities into your space. I didn't do that one. So the other couple of notes that I have here is doing an audit of your website. I've got some links here on my website, and add accessibility goals to your strategic plan. I like to finish up by talking about planning. It's okay to respond to accommodations as they come. That is how that works, but it's even better if you're prepared and you're not flustered by a request, that you have thought about it, you've budgeted for it, it's in your strategic plan or in your program plan, that you know who to call if this happens. If you get a request for ASL, here's our local company that we use for those services, and all kinds of things. Where do we get large print? Well, you guys probably are the large print. You guys definitely know that. I talk to our library when I need large print and braille. So yeah, there's all kinds of ways to do audits and check-ins and stuff for you to be prepared. One thing I didn't say yet that I meant to say at the top. I have this advisory in the arts committee. We meet twice a year. That is a best practice. I highly recommend pulling together a committee. I compensate them for their time. They give me advice on how our programs are looking, how our materials are looking. And then also we talk about how we can move forward the field of the arts in Indiana in accessibility related things. So we'll talk about webinars we want to design or things like that. I recently met with them maybe a month ago, and I said, hey, I got this library thing coming up. I'm really excited, but you guys tell me, what should we talk about? What should we put into this presentation? And one of the things they said was that we love libraries. Tell them thank you. Tell them thank you for being an open space, a welcoming space that a lot of folks that either they work with or in their own disability communities, disability community has a higher percentage of people with low incomes. And so having a free open space that, doesn't make them feel uncomfortable, those sorts of things, they are very grateful for libraries. And I wanted to pass along that expression that they said to me when it comes to disabilities and the library. So you're already doing a great job. And when you do arts, there's no wrong answer in arts. Process over product, right? Like, it's very accessible. I don't think you guys will have any problem making adaptations, but thinking ahead, planning ahead is great. Let's see, key takeaways. Understand and recognize the importance of accessibility. Hopefully we're there. Adapt, make sure you have tools that you can use. Think about that and plan ahead and commit to implementing maybe one strategy that really stood out to you today. And I would ask you, if you can't put in the chat for my sake, what's one thing that you took away from this that you think you will be able to implement in your program this summer? I would love to see that in the chat. What was exciting or new information to you? And then we'll get to questions here. I do have a bunch of resources. You are going to get the slideshow or the recording and everything, so you can go to some of these links. Of course, the National Endowment for the Arts is a big partner of ours, and they have a good accessibility website. Our website, our accessibility website, and our own VSA, which the website's actually Art Mix, so that one's wrong. I'll fix it. Lots of other links I have. Things we didn't get to go over in depth that are great too. Person first language and identity first language. That's a whole conversation you have to have with your own community. Disability etiquette. There's lots of great resources online, videos, checklists, do's and don'ts lists. If I were starting anywhere, I would start there. If you are not familiar with disability etiquette and person first language and identity first language, do that. Start there and share it with your staff. Share it with every single person who works there. Disability etiquette is going to take you a long way. Like I said before, there's a million right answers. The only wrong answer for accessibility and accessibility in the arts is no. The only wrong answer is to say, I won't do that. I won't make an accommodation for you, or I can't make an accommodation for you. There are so many creative solutions you can come up with that should not be the answer. There's probably scenarios in which you can't do something, but for the most part, like I showed, a $5 pencil gripper will be the solution, or moving a chair will be a solution. And so anything but saying no is what I recommend. We didn't get into disability justice, but there's lots out there for that. And we didn't get into the service animals conversation, which is a good conversation and something I recommend looking into. You can write a whole service animal policy for your facility if you haven't. And as I close it down, I want you all to know you can do this. You can do this. You are doing it. And go do it. You can do it. I love this picture. This is a group we have up in South Bend that the artist is in there. She's leading the people in dance. Okay, it's time I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to look at the questions now. Wow.
It looks like there are 4 in the Q&A and maybe a couple we can get to in the chat if I can scroll back.
Okay, so self-assessment checklist workbook. The first question in the Q&A, is the self-assessment checklist something you created or something that can be shared? Yes to both. I have one checklist that I ask our grantees to fill out here in Indiana, and I'm happy to share that. Actually, I'll show you right now and share that because I thought that might be a question. I recently went through this document with my advisory committee, which is why I feel good about sharing it. Our self-assessment checklist is split up into a few sections. Public outreach, are you doing XYZ? Arriving and navigating, how does someone arrive and navigate through your space? And there's checks. And there's meaningful participation, which is more that programmatic. And organization accessibility goes into that. Are you planning ahead and are you budgeting? So I can share that. That is also available on our IEC website. And the one I fill out is actually required by the National Endowment for the Arts at the federal level. And it's a huge workbook. The 504 workbook with the cultural manager's handbook goes with it. It's a pretty big thing, but that's also accessible online. And I am happy to share the link to that as well. Second question, how do you handle the situation if accommodation cannot be made due to for whatever reason? How do you handle the situation? Like I said, I try not to say no. We try to come up with different locations. One of the things I talk to grantees a lot about where they said, oh, we want to do this movie screening on the second floor, but there's no elevator or way up except stairs. And I say, if you want our grant funding, which is your choice to say no to, but we require you're accessible, so you need to find a different location. So it's on the person providing the service to find that accommodation. If you say no, you are opening yourself up to some liabilities for that person to lodge a complaint, civil rights complaint, things like that. So it can take some back and forth, and that's fine. You can say, well, that's not actually possible, but here's another idea I might have, or what other ideas could we do? I've seen that done for sure, where people want X and it's like, wow, we don't have that, but we can do this and this. And they go, okay, fine. So be open to having a negotiation or a conversation about that. And there are times where someone requests something that's not based on their disability, right? You might have people come in, this gets a little bit into that service animal, emotional support animal things. There are some technicalities where service animals have a very specific definition. So if someone comes in with an emotional support animal, what do you say to them? Technically, that's not under the ADA. So there's some things to get into there about how you talk to someone about that. There are tons of policies and resources online to get through that conversation. So I recommend looking at that. Oh, what a good question. With the theme Color Our World, there's two questions here that are similar. How do we make that seem accessible for people with visual disabilities or like color blindness? Okay. So good question. I think that how to make that accessible to people with visual impairments. I would ask people with visual impairment. That's what I would do right now. I don't have that viewpoint for myself. And so I have some beginning thoughts, but I don't feel comfortable speaking for that. So what I would do, honestly, if this came across my desk and I was like, oh, this is what we want to call it, let's do some investigation. And so I will reach out to your own community and say, hey, we've got this. We want to make it accessible. Let's talk about other activities we can incorporate that connect with your community. That's what I would do. The actual name of the thing. I think the program activities I saw in your handbook are all great and I think would be very accessible to people with disabilities, with visual impairment. I think you'll be able to find a lot of options. Okay, there's a question about applying for grants related to, arts programs. Oh, well that, I was gonna say related to accessibility, I'm very sorry to say there's limited grants out there. That's a big need in the whole country, grants related to accessibility. But grants related to arts programs, yes, I do know about that. So I'm a state arts agency at the Indiana Arts Commission, and all states and territories have an arts council or arts agency at the state government level. And they likely have something that's available to you to bring an artist in or cover supplies or all types of variations on that. Some of the grants might be for youth or for older adults, but definitely check out your state arts agency. Local arts councils would be city council, city-based arts councils. Well, some of them will have project-based grants. I know ours has mostly operating grants, but maybe project grants, and then community foundations. If you have community foundations in your area, always great about project grants for arts in libraries. Yes. Okay. Accommodations for outdoor events is a question I get a lot. You still need to make outdoor events accessible. And all I'll say about that is there's this awesome resource from one of the regional ADA centers that I'll include the link to. It's a whole handbook about outdoor festivals and events and how to make them more accessible. In your experience, this is a great question too, thank you. In your experience, are there specific challenges that libraries in rural areas might face when finding working with organizations and resources for accessibility? Well, yes, of course, everyone, and specifically rural, but also the disability community, both of those communities struggle with transportation. So you're going to think about that if you're in a rural location, if a person with a disability needs transportation support, how you might help them with that or refer them to other local resources, so transportation. Things in rural communities, I don't usually have a problem finding artists or arts organizations to support you in your work. So if you're like, I think I want to do printmaking, but that's not my expertise and there's no lesson for it, or someone in our community asked for photography, maybe I need to find a photographer in my community to support me in this. You could get a grant, or you could ask a local photography guild or a printmakers guild, or it's just a single, in a rural community, maybe just a single person who can help you with that art form and give you some tips on it. But I know that they exist even in rural communities. I was in a rural community a couple weeks ago at a library doing a creative aging program, and the woman was showing me their makerspace. She said, this is our makerspace. I run the makerspace program. And then also here on the wall, this is my artwork. I'm the guest artist for the month. And then we were talking about arts in their community. And she's like, well, also I run the arts organization in town and I'm part-time at this and part-time at that. So she was the arts community in that small town, but she was doing it. She was there and she was a great resource. And she had connected herself to other artists in counties around her. So she was a resource that you could use for connecting to other arts organizations. So transportation in rural areas, think about public transportation, because public transportation is under the ADA. And so your community should be providing transportation for folks with disability. So just supporting them in that and understanding how that works for them. But otherwise, I think you guys have such a creative, rural communities have, and I say you guys, but I'm from a rural community originally. So rural communities have a lot of creativity and resources that are rich there. So I have all the faith for rural community art. Okay, there's a question for Abby, if you want to answer one, Abby, about the inclusion committee.
Yeah, I saw that. I had to think about that a little bit. If you're okay with me answering that real quick, I can.
Sure.
The question is, could the inclusion committee talk a little bit about why this webinar is important / why it's not only relevant to summer reading programs, but integral? So I work at a talking book and braille library, so my life is kind of centered around the visually impaired, physically disabled, or reading disabled people. And so I like to look at it as like we always have to be striving to be as inclusive as possible. But from a public library standpoint, summer reading is a great way to start it because, that's when all the kids are in there. That's when all the adults and the parents are coming in too. But you do programming throughout the year. It doesn't just stop with summer reading. So we should always be striving to adapt and overcome anything that some people might present us with and say, hey, we can fix that for you. We can have an ASL interpreter. We can have, any sort of accommodation, just to kind of, as librarians, make us a little more light on our feet. And so we can just kind of like pivot as quickly as we need to, because that is always one big thing with programs is pivoting as fast as you can when something might happen or, a person doesn't show up or the presenter's not there. So that's always, I think, a good, important. Summer reading is really a good stepping off point, but inclusivity never stops. We should never stop making adaptations. We should never stop including all people that come in through our door. So I guess that's my answer.
The last one I'm going to answer is about cognitive or developmental disabilities, accommodations for that specifically. And I can say from watching of classes of our local VSA, so first of all, consult with the ARC, the self-advocates under the ARC organization in your area. They specialize in that and they will tell you exactly what they love about the arts and are excited about the arts and what they can do and want to do. Also, the VSAs will be knowledgeable about cognitive and developmental disabilities in regards to arts. But for me, with the arts, I think focusing on the joy, the process, focusing on what do you want as a participant, asking the participant, what do you want to get out of this? Why did you come here? And like, what do you want to get out of this experience? That's universal, okay? No matter the disability or the situation of the person coming to the class, let's bring joy and be excited and be focused on what process they can participate in that's going to make them happy. And I think we can do that if we don't set ourselves up for like, here's the paper plate and we're gluing exactly 7 macaronis on it and then it's going to look like a snowman at the end. And not everyone can do that. Like maybe I, can't use fine motor skills and with the tweezers and the macaroni. So we're making adaptations that instead of macaroni, we're doing a fistful of something else on there, right? So we're making those adaptations. We're focusing on the process and the materials and the medium instead of on the finished product. I think that can be accessible for everyone and anyone. Thank you so much for having me. We'll check on the questions. If there's any left, there'll be some follow-up and
Hey, Stephanie,
hope this
there's
was
just one
helpful.
question left.
Oh,
And it says
we kind of talked about that.
about
The
navigating color
blindness.
blindness. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Wow, you guys are excited, helpful. Like, I love people answering other people's questions in the chat. Great job, everyone. Thank you. Oh, adding low-cost options. That's a great accommodation. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Stephanie for giving this great presentation, and thank you everybody for being a part of this. This was a great turnout, really.
I agree. Thank you so much. We had so many great kernels of future conversations, perhaps, in the chat. So thank you so much again, Stephanie, for all of your expertise and all the food for thought.
Yeah, there's a lot to cover.
There
I always
is,
feel
this
like,
is a
well,
very large topic.
we can't get into this, we can't get into that, but yeah,
Yep.
hopefully
Well,
that
we're
was,
librarians, so we're good
yeah, do
researchers,
the
right?
research,
That's
guys.
right. Yep.
I'll give you some starter prompts.
Okay, well, just to wrap it up, thanks so much for joining us here at CSLP on our Inclusion Committee's webinar for this year. Please note that our summer symposium will be on December 5th, and I know some of you asked a little bit more about Color Our World and getting into the programming manual and that type of thing, and we are going to be doing some of that in our symposium, but also we will be doing a programming manual webinar in spring. So please subscribe to our newsletter and look out for that coming down the pipe. So I think that's it for all of us today. So have a great Thanksgiving and the rest of your year. Join us though for the symposium on the 5th. So don't leave us completely before the holidays. Great. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.